Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Followers. Today we're joined by three special guests instead of the usual one to talk about physical activity and sport, particularly for females. I'm just going to let them introduce themselves, then we'll get stuck straight in. So first of all, we're joined by Sara Mcqueen. Sara, how are you? And can you give us just a brief background about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thanks a million for having me on. So my name is Sara Mcqueen. I'm currently a final year PhD student in DCU. Brief background, I did public health as a bachelor's, master's in children's health and wellbeing, and then ended up doing a PhD in the world of physical activity, developing a school-based physical activity intervention in schools with girls to hopefully improve or increase their physical activity levels.
Lovely, thank you. Next then we're joined by Dr. Bronagh McGrane. Bronagh, thanks for coming on, and give your little background and intro there as well, please.
So I'm currently a lecturer in physical education in DCU, and I would have done my PhD probably in a similar area to Sara in physical activity and school-based interventions and also fundamental movement skills. I'm probably most recently involved with you, John, in physical activity and wellbeing study, which is my focus recently. My hobbies would be coaching, particularly in girls' sport, and also playing Gaelic football until I retire.
Lovely, thank you. And next then we have Emma Cowley. Emma, welcome on board, and if you can just give your own little introduction there too.
Yeah, of course, thanks a million for having me. So I'm doing my PhD over here in Liverpool, John Moores University, from Dublin, obviously, as you can tell from my non-Scouse accent. I did PE and biology in DCU. Actually, Bronagh, you were doing your PhD when I was in DCU, and then I did my master's over in Glasgow doing sport and exercise science and medicine, and I have a bit of a background in coaching as well, so I've been coaching females in terms of in the gym and online since 2016, and my area of research is also focused around development of physical activity interventions for teenage girls.
Lovely. Thanks all for joining us. So because all this is based on physical activity and sport, Bronagh, because you're the most qualified of us, can you just give us kind of a working definition? So as we go through this, what is physical activity and what is sport?
Probably just the most broad definition and most used, I suppose, is the physical activity is any bodily movement. And in terms of the guidelines that you'd hear of 60 minutes a day for children and teenagers, we'd be talking moderate to vigorous physical activity. So the difference in, I suppose, going for a stroll would be your light physical activity, and then when you up the pace, where you're just starting to sweat a small bit, or you can hold a conversation, but just about, that would be your moderate to vigorous. So for those health benefits, you'd be talking your moderate to vigorous physical activity. And then for sport, I suppose it's more organised physical activity in a sporting setting. So that it would be scheduled, it would be a team or individual sport situation, rather than just being active for the sake of being active. I suppose that's what I would call them anyway. You might have a different definition.
No, that's absolutely spot on. We'll move on then, because both Emma and Sara, you've done quite a bit of work around focus groups and talking to younger girls around, well, why are you active, why are you not active, what makes it more difficult. So I might jump straight into stuff like that. Very first point, we'll go to Sara there first. From looking around stuff, how active are girls currently?
So there was a CSPA study, which you're well familiar with in your research as well. It stands for Children's Sports Participation in Physical Activity. So in Ireland, it was a national study, over 6,000 students, if I remember right, primary and post-primary, so primary and secondary schools, boys and girls. So they did a study back in 2010, so a snapshot, cross-section of the study, 2010, and then they repeated then in 2018, so they could see the physical activity levels across both primary to post-primary, but then across boys and girls as well, and then they could obviously compare then between 2010 data and 2018 data. So currently in Ireland, for boys and girls, post-primary, which is kind of the cohort I'd be working with, is 12%, if I'm correct, or 12 went down to 10, I think, or went 14 to 12, 10. I work with, as you can tell, I work with adolescent females, so they actually are lower, and they went from 9% to 7%. I know that for a fact, between 2010 and 2018. So the cohort I work with at the moment, which is post-primary females, are 7%. across the country.
Not that's spot on. Emma, then, from being based over in Liverpool and stuff, you've probably noticed how that may differ from England or other countries in Europe or around the world. Are girls in Ireland much less active or about the same as other countries?
I mean, like so my studies work with girls in England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, and Ireland, and that was for focus groups and for the intervention side of things, and there was no marked differences between any of the groups. So yeah, it's pretty, and I think there was a global study done in 2020 where I think it was in and around 10% across the board for girls, meeting like the recommended daily amount of physical activity.
I should mention, the daily recommendations for anyone under age of 18 is 60 minutes a day. So what I mean by 7% is 7% of girls across Ireland meet the recommended daily amount.
And when it comes to looking at that, how are we going about measuring some of that? Like to say, how do we know how active they are? What's the easiest way when we're going with larger groups to figure out how much activity they're actually getting every day?
So this in research is objective or subjective. So subjective would be self-reported. So we just do questionnaires and we basically ask them of the typical in a typical week, how many days would you meet your moderate to vigorous physical activity levels? Out of 7 days, they take between 0 and 7. And if they take all 7, then they meet the recommended daily amounts basically. And then you can do objective as well. So you can do trackers or accelerometers, and ideally in the research world you do both, which I think Emma's doing.
Yeah, I'm using both for my current studies. They are challenging to say the least, working with accelerometers, but I mean, I guess for objective measures, I don't have too many participants. I have 150, so it was kind of doable between borrowing monitors from DCU and over here. But yeah, I think where possible, it would be great to use objective measures. But obviously that comes with their own set of concerns and limitations.
There's probably a case there then is if 1,000 saying how active they are, and if you have 100 of them with the more accelerometer stuff, you can see, okay, is it reasonably accurate then what they're saying, and having the smaller part of the group with the objective stuff to back it up, say, yeah, what they're saying is fairly accurate. Next thing we'll dig into, because you've done quite a few focus groups that have really informed what you've gone on and done. When we start with you, Emma, what were some of the key things that came out, particularly because you're looking at girls from a few different countries, then we might narrow it in just to Ireland alone after that, but some of the key things that jumped up, particularly on barriers first, and then we'll see how they feed forward into what can help be more active.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there wasn't all that many facilitators identified by the girls when I was talking to them about kind of, what helps and hinders their participation in physical activity. And I think, so I spoke to girls in schools and then also kind of more in the community setting, and there just didn't seem to be any kind of marked difference between any of them. And I think for me, the biggest thing that came out of it was just their unbelievable fear of being judged, whether it was their skills being judged, what they wear, what they say, and that is preventing them from taking part or from even kind of attempting anything, for like this fear of being made fun of by other people. And I think what's worrying about that is obviously it's something very difficult to change and to overcome. And again, like I guess that fear of judgment, then a subcategory of that is around body image. And those other kind of normal things that we see, I guess, for both men and males and females, like in that adolescent age group, especially when they're transitioning into secondary school and they have this wider net of social, peers and all these other influences, and they're moving away from kind of that parental support. And yeah, so I think fear of judgment for me was definitely the overriding barrier for girls.
And did you notice that any more in terms of those going to a mixed school versus an all-girls school, or even, you said you looked at some in community and some school-based, was there any difference there either?
Not really. I mean, like the girls talked about how they preferred the girls in mixed schools preferred having sports separated by sex and kind of having female only PE classes. Now that obviously comes with its pros and cons. I think in a short term, it might be a solution, but really I don't know if it's addressing the real issue. But yeah, the girls are from the mixed sex schools did kind of prefer to be separate, and they felt less judged, because I think the boys were another barrier in itself, whether they aren't passing to the girls, or the girls are influenced and don't want to be active around them, don't want to be sweating, don't want to be red-faced around them. But yeah, that's kind of...
And in terms of specific to any activities, did you notice a different kind of response? Oh yeah, when we do that, I actually don't notice it as much, but when we do these sports, games, activities, that just makes it so much worse.
I don't think necessarily that came out of my focus groups in terms of fearing being judged, but I think that there was a big kind of barrier against doing typical PE lessons, so around team-based sports, around typical things that we've all experienced in PE, things that I guess are on the curriculum, whether it's netball, basketball, team-based things in general. There wasn't a massive push towards. They wanted things that were new, they wanted variety, they wanted choice, they wanted to feel they were in control. I guess basic around self-determination theory, what the girls were saying perfectly matched that, that they wanted that autonomy. But yeah, I think just there was a big kind of feeling of being bored and being forced to do things just because that's always been the way to do it.
Can you just elaborate a little there on what is self-determination theory and how it might relate to physical activity?
Yeah, so I guess with self-determination theory, it's this idea that, you'll be more active, or not just in physical activity, in anything. It could be stopping smoking, it could be dieting, whatever it is, that, if you really want, if the motivation is from within and you're intrinsically motivated and you're not doing it for a reward or an external punishment, you're more likely to do it, you're more likely to enjoy it, you're more likely to sustain that behavior, and you're more likely to reach that intrinsic motivation if you have 3 basic psychological needs that are met. So this is the need of autonomy, to feel like you're kind of in charge of what you do. If you feel competent, so you feel like you're able to do the task at hand, and this feeling of relatedness, so that you care for other people but they also care for you. And if those needs are met, you're more likely to be intrinsically motivated.
Oh, that's spot on, thanks. And Sara, then, because all your focus groups were largely conducted in Dublin, or in Ireland anyway, did they kind of mirror what Emma has noticed, or were there any kind of specific differences you found just from the cohort you were working with?
No, actually very, very similar to Emma in terms of beliefs about capability. So I used a different methodology, I guess. I used a behaviour change wheel, which involved in the behaviour change wheel is a COM-B component. So it's capabilities, opportunities and motivations that influence one behaviour. And it could be any behaviour, like Emma touched on. It mightn't just be physical activity. It could be, trying to stop smoking, or any kind of a behaviour trying to change. So I looked at the capabilities and the opportunities and the motivations that could whether hinder or facilitate or act as a barrier to them being physically active, and that kind of structured then my focus groups and the questions and the questionnaire then. But similar to that, one of the ones that came up was the beliefs about the capabilities of actually being physically active. So their self-efficacy or self-belief or self-confidence, I guess, that they can actually be active. And that's one of the main things actually. Well, one of the things I found interesting was that they might not identify as being sporty, and then they're not active, but they're I'm trying to say sport is like a subset of being active, so you can be active but not be sporty, if you get me. So lots of the girls would be like, oh, I'm not good at that, and just wouldn't do it, and that could be because of the social influences from their peers. Probably because I'm in the schools, they didn't talk about their families as much and the influence that their families would have for their parents. It was more so their classmates and their friends, I guess, and I would be either barrier and or facilitator. So it was like, if they have a friend that's doing it, then they'll do it. If their friend doesn't do it, they tend to not do it. So it could be a pro or a con, the social influence side of it. What else came up was another barrier, well, back pre-COVID, was the changing of the uniforms in before PE and things like that. The minor barriers, but still significant. Our lack of reinforcement that came up in my data as well. So not just positive reinforcements, or the lack of positive reinforcements, I should say, sorry. So they would have negative reinforcements in place, and that if they didn't go attend PE, maybe 3 P's in a row, they might get a note in their journal. But they didn't have anything as positive. So if they didn't attend 3 in a row and they get something as a reward, you know. So they'd notice the negative side of it, but they wouldn't feel intrinsically, I suppose, motivated in that way to want to do it themselves. Unless they're part of a team sport, then they were a little bit more intended to like have goals or behaviour regulation around that. They'd know at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday, I have training. But if they're not doing it themselves and they don't have their own reinforcements or goals or structures in place, that tends to be a barrier then. So that's what I kind of focused with my focus groups, and then I moved on from, okay, these are the factors influencing whether you participate in physical activity, but I want to co-develop an intervention with you guys to see what would work. And then I started asking them questions like, if we did this, would it work? And what would increase participation, I guess. And 4 kind of main things came up. One was enjoyment, which was actually a very, very big part of it. So it was like the social side, the fun side. They actually wanted to do activities that they enjoyed and found fun, I guess, and the social side of it then comes with their friends as well. And non-competitive stuff came up as well. So they would have been a barrier to being physically active would be like that other, someone else might be way better at them. And a competitive nature then lots of girls didn't really like. So they wanted it to be fun, non-competitive. Like Emma touched on there, choice, autonomy was a massive one that came out as well. They wanted the choice. I don't know if it's because they were teenage girls or what made them want to really have their autonomy over it, but they didn't want the PE teacher telling them today we're going to do dance or today we're going to do this. They wanted to choose it. And then the positive reinforcement, which I touched on there earlier, that they just wanted something in place, and it could be something as getting a certificate at the end of 10-week intervention, or something that they know that they're being held accountable and they have kind of another extra motivation to want to attend.
Sarah, something you mentioned there at the very start, that some girls don't see themselves as sporty, but we'd see sport and physical activity as different things. Had they made that differentiation yet, that if they weren't sporty, had they realised that they don't have to be, but they can still be active, or people who are active? Had that dawned on them yet?
After I kind of spoke about them, I kind of nitpicked picked it apart, I guess. I was like, so what do you mean when you say you're not sporty? And then they started questioning, being like, well, I don't, let's say it's football, or I don't play this. And then I'd ask them but do you go for your walks in the week and evenings, or do you one girl or a few girls really liked Pilates and these different sports that they wouldn't associate as called sporty, but yet they're being active. And then when I started realising that differentiation, I didn't have to go into definitions of it. I don't think they would have cared about that. But when they started just questioning themselves, lots of them then started realising that, yeah, they actually are active.
At the start of my focus groups, I got the girls to do so they had 2 questionnaires. So one of them was just a tick box. So they either chose the quote, I am sporty, I'll get involved where I can, or it was, I hate sports, I'll sit out whenever I get the chance. So they picked one of them which they perceived themselves to be, and then they also filled in a physical activity an actual questionnaire, which was then scored afterwards. And when we compared them, there was just no association between them. That the girls, so they're not understanding that actively commuting, walking to school, cycling to school, could actually mean that they are a more active person than the captain on the basketball team who actually only plays basketball once a week. They just don't have that concept that physical activity can be gardening or walking the dog, and I think that's a really important movement that we need to shift to that.
Is that potentially something that might throw off when we're doing a lot of the self-report stuff, that they're saying how many days they have been active and they're only counting sport and they're not counting some of the other stuff? Can that potentially are potentially a lot of adolescent girls more active than they realise, particularly because they're not aware that does count as physical activity? Emma, again.
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, because you have the tendency to over-report on them and under-report. And even, when I got some of my questionnaires back from my last study, how much time did you spend on your phone? Less than half an hour a day. And I'm like, come on. So I don't know. I think maybe it would almost even out when you have people who are over-reporting, you have some that are under-reporting, but I guess that's just one of the big limitations of self-report questionnaires.
We actually got transition years last year, the year before, to do a project and a physical activity there to see how active they are. Like, only count your moderate to vigorous physical activity now. Give a little thing like that to guide what is moderate to vigorous. One girl, yeah, I did an hour today, I had home ec. I was like, there's no way you're chopping that hard that it counts as moderate to vigorous physical activity. To bring in Bronagh then, and just to touch slightly on your day job, like as a lecturer in primary PE, you've a lot coming there. Like, any of us who do PE teaching, we're obviously doing it because we are active, we're sporty, everything like that. Whereas to be a primary PE teacher, there's loads of different kind of backgrounds that will feed in there. And while PE is a part of it, it can be a very small part in some people's views and not in others. Have you noticed much of a difference there in terms of those who perceive themselves as sporty and active, and how that may impact their attitudes towards being active then from that?
Yeah, I guess when I took up that position in primary PE, it would have been my first, like you said, I've probably been surrounded by sporty people because I've been sporty, and anyone like I'm friends with is sporty. So, and I would have lectured in the UK, and it was lecturing PE teachers, so they're sporty. And even then when I went to primary, I guess it was like, oh God, like this might be where the issue is, because you all of a sudden have people that their passion is maybe music or art, or they might just not have been brought up with sport, and all of a sudden, like, I was going in with this expectation probably of where they would be, and it was like, okay, this might be where, like, after doing my PhD in fundamental movement skills, like, this could be where the issue is that these are going out to teach PE and they actually have really bad memories of PE and aren't active and don't want to be, I suppose. Like, I'd be lecturing and you'd have people like flinching if a ball's coming to them and stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, what's going on here? Like, how am I actually going to teach these? Like, you're teaching the basics again, I suppose, to them, but I guess for me it's just trying to get them, and like the majority of my lectures is females, because it's primary, and stereotypically there's very few males in the lecture, so it is mostly females, but you can see straight away on the people who like don't want to be there, like they really don't want to be there, and you're just trying to get them to open up their minds that you do have to deliver, like, you will be teaching PE, you know, and it's trying to get them that even if they can't, maybe they're not confident to demonstrate, that they're able to break that skill down for the children, and it's getting them to realise, I guess, the importance of physical activity and PE for them, that, you know, if they've had a bad experience in school, I guess it's very hard to undo that, and you're thinking of all the children that's going to pass through their class, so you're really like, I need to change their mindset somehow, and win them over by the end. But yeah, I guess that's a massive part of it, is just trying to get them to open up. But I guess in college they have different friend groups, and that's probably where you do see the mix of the sporty girl with the maybe girl who likes art, and it's not that you have to be one or the other, but they start to mix a bit more, I think, rather than maybe just sporty children staying together, which is good because it opens the mindset, like the girl said, to, oh, I'm not sporty, and all of a sudden actually you see they're a person that plays sport, and maybe you're a person that plays the violin, you know, and it's only a part of you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You're like one of the studies that came out of your PhD, looking at fundamental movement skills, and, you know, we chatted about these with Stephen Bean a few weeks ago, but the difference in ability to perform between males and females, but particularly the link between fundamental movement skills and self-confidence, and how it seems so much stronger in females than males. Could you give us a few thoughts about that, or even just an overview of what you found first?
Yeah, so we would have looked at fundamental movement skills in both boys and girls, and they were around age 13. We also looked at their physical self-confidence. So basically we asked them on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you at running in a straight line, catching a ball with two hands? And yeah, we wanted to see was there associations between them. And it was actually like stereotypically like girls would probably say this is true, in that the males, there was no association with males between their physical self-confidence and their performance, because on average most of the males are rating themselves between 8 and 10. Like, they were like, yeah, I can do that, no problem. Whereas the females, even if they could do it, would err on the side of caution. You know, even if they knew they could kick a ball, they might go, oh, I'll give myself a 7. You know, so I guess, yeah, it probably comes back to then the males in the study, their FMS scores were still a lot higher than the females. So they are more skilled, but they also believe they're even better than they are. But then it comes back to, there's Dweck's theory, which obviously says that if you perceive that you're proficient at something, you're more likely to do it. So if you think you're good at something, whether you are or you're not, you're more likely to go and do it. So therefore their skills are going to develop more as well. So it's that kind of vicious cycle that with females, they're not that confident at doing it, so they're not really going to put themselves in the position where they think, I'm not that good at that, so I'm not putting myself in that position. So then their skills aren't being developed further. So it's just, I guess, a massive vicious cycle. But yeah, so.
And to try and combat that, is it a kind of a two-armed approach, in that one way we need to create a safe space for them to develop those skills in an area without judgment, but also at the same time try and build up confidence in, well, you are actually better than you realise here?
Yeah, I think so, because there's kind of, like, when I think about it, even myself, just my own opinion, I would think like there's kind of there's a positive to bumping someone up and giving them loads of confidence, and like I remember learning that you needed to tell someone like they're doing something really well like 5 times at least before it actually starts setting in. But then you also don't want to give someone that false sense of confidence that they're going to go out and think they're great, and next thing they will get a reality check at some point and they'll fall flat. So like, in my opinion, like, yeah, we definitely need to give them more confidence. And I suppose it does come back to that kind of environment and safe environment. Like, I know I did a study when I was over in the UK, and it was actually like, we gave a class Fitbits. So like, we thought this would motivate them to be active. But actually in the end it had the opposite effect. And they became less confident in their abilities of being active, because, and now when I think about it, with Strava like ruining my life at the moment, like, I'm comparing myself to everyone else. And while I might be happy, like, I'll go for a run and I'll be like, geez, I'm glad I got that done, you know, on a Friday, it's great. But actually all of a sudden I'm comparing myself to like my teammates, and even if there's one person that's ahead of me, I'm automatically like take a confidence hit. And that was the same when we gave the class the Fitbits. Like, because of your leaderboard, only one person is on top and everyone else has taken that confidence hit. And I guess with that as well, like, children they might have said they were active at the time, but they didn't realise like 10,000 steps what that actually meant. So all of a sudden they might have been, geez, I'm able to be active, but then they were like, geez, 10,000 steps, I can't do that. So I guess those small goals, like, and even now with my Garmin, it's probably better in terms of it would base your daily goal steps. Like, if I'm having a bad week, it automatically comes down. And if it's a really bad week, you know, it brings it down to like 6,000, and then it only bumps it up to maybe 7 to 8 and so on. So it's like achievable. I think that's what we need to do with females, is like give them smaller goals and in that safe environment, so that they start to feel confidence about themselves. Yeah, kind of went off tangent, sorry.
No, that was really good. It actually ties in something I hadn't planned to bring up. But Sarah, do you want to tell us your kind of daily step goals, or some of the challenges you did recently, and maybe some of the reactions to that? And shame us with our minuscule aims of 10,000.
Will you stop? Like, you wrote to me there about my poor shoes. I need to buy new runners. I was actually talking about this with my supervisor this morning, Sarah Jane. I find it personally, I don't know if everyone would agree with me, but I be like if I have a challenge, and it could be like extra whatever number of steps a day, but if I have a challenge for a month or a week, it just tends to keep me on track. So like in January I just came up with like I need something to motivate me, especially now that the gym's closed. I was like, what can I do? And I was going for my walk, and then I was like 500,000 steps in a month. You know, it's about 500,000 steps. I have 30 days to do it, or 31 days. I think I started on the 2nd of January, so 30 days to do it. And I was like, what does that work out as? 16,000 something steps a day. I was like, okay. So give or take. Sometimes I go more, sometimes I go lower. And then March came around, and lo and behold, the gyms are still closed. So I was like, I need to up this. So I'm on 650,000 steps now for the month of March. So I have 31 days to do 650,000 steps, which is approximately 21,000 something a day.
And have you had people kind of row in beside you, set their own little challenges and stuff in around the same number, or achievable for them, like, and is there a little support group there now?
I have. It's I think great. Some friends are doing it with me, the 650,000. Some are doing the 500,000 that they actually, in January thought they couldn't do, and then they realised by the end of January they actually did. So people kind of underestimate what they're actually able to do as well. So a few people doing the 500,000 now for March, or Marchathon, which is quite popular as well. I've joined that with some girls in my office, and we all encourage ourselves. We have a little WhatsApp group, and we send in our photos of our steps every day. So yeah, no, I really do think it makes a massive difference when you have a little bit of a social support network.
Yeah, that's really good. And Emma, I might get you to hop in on this now, but looking at what Bronagh says there about obviously there is the goal of so many steps or so many runs or whatever pace, but then converting that to a leaderboard can sometimes go beyond accountability and maybe lead into competition. And how do we potentially go about balancing that between, okay, there's this thing here where it's posted and I'm accountable, but we don't want to make it too much of a competition, because the best will probably get better and the worst will probably get worse or even drop out. And how can we maybe set that up in a way in advance of whatever challenges or interventions we might look to put in?
I think it's such a tricky one, because you know, like I think challenges, and something that came out of the focus groups was that the girls did like having challenges for themselves, like not necessarily in comparison with other people, and not necessarily competition, but like, you know, yeah, just improving themselves, beating personal best and whatever, and also that accountability to other people was a big you know, facilitator, whether that's their peers, whether that's a coach, PE teacher, parents, whatever. But I think that there's a really fine line between I guess becoming, whether it's with steps or with macros, or whether it's, you know, where it can be really helpful in the beginning to kind of as an educational tool to kind of get you started and get you moving more, eating right or whatever. And then, you know, especially I think with women and with clients that I've worked with, it can almost become like quite obsessive. And, you know, it comes to 9 o'clock at night and it's like raining out, but you haven't hit your 10,000 steps and off they go. Or, you know, they're down 5 grams of protein and I better go get an egg white, you know, and these like small things that don't, it's kind of, as I said, I think that there's a place for it and there's a time for it and it can be helpful, but I don't know necessarily how to balance that, how to kind of, I think as well, like with Bronagh said, like there's a group in my research group that are using so they have, I think, their Garmin's, and everything is tracked on their watch. This is for inactive people, like trying to get them active. And I think it's a great stimulus. And it's different, I think, for us, you know, when we are active already, and it's more of like a tool, like to monitor our own progress. But I think for people who are initially starting out, I think obviously you have that novelty effect will eventually wear off as well. But again, it can almost lead to extrinsic motivation, where it is like this reward or external arbitrary number that we're trying to meet. And what happens when you take that away? Are they educated enough to, I don't mean educated enough, but I mean like do they know enough about like their own behaviours and their own motivations to continue that behaviour when this number, the scales or whatever is taken away? I don't know if I've answered your question or if I've also gone off on a tangent there, but yeah.
No, that was really good, particularly looking like at individuals. Some people will be more internally motivated and some people will be more externally motivated, and you kind of have to balance it between what suits the individual versus what's best for the whole group. And Sarah's point there of the overall monthly target of 500,000, 650,000, it can help take, or it can help take into account some kind of life situations that on this day I might only be able to get in 5,000 steps, but on Saturday and Sunday I might be able to get in 20, and helps you balance out over the course of the week, as opposed to those little things day to day that may end up at some stage of the week just leading to extra stress and kind of takes away some of the benefits of the increase in activity overall. Bronagh, I just want to come back to you, and particularly your own background, because like you've played sport, you've played at Intercounty, you've been there in Croke Park and all like that, and I've even noticed you that while you've gone back to club, you've still ensured you're being active in other ways. Like you've your own kayak. That's not something many people have. You're still into cycling, running. You've done your few quest races, all like that. Did kind of doing athletics as when you were younger help make other sports going forward easier, because there's kind of that slight, I suppose, concentration on developing fundamental movement skills through that, and did it make stuff easier? But did it also help kind of develop a lifelong view of being active even after kind of competitive pulls back a bit, but you've kind of that longer term view for it as well?
Yeah, I suppose even in the last few years I've probably thought about that more. Like when I grew up, like I probably started athletics when I was about 6, because my siblings were doing it and I was the youngest. And then I would have started Gaelic football playing with the boys team, and then progressed to a ladies club. But I would have done athletics right up till I was about 18 competitively, but trying to juggle both sports. And it was always going to be the one that was getting the gun, because it wasn't as sociable, I suppose. It's a lot more serious, and it probably, I think back to now, like, why am I motivated? And I probably learned a lot of things from athletics in terms of self-discipline. You trained a lot by yourself, and everything had to be monitored. You're talking split seconds all the time, so that's your sleep, that's your food. So everything was monitored a lot closer than with Gaelic football. And it gave you that foundation, I guess, of understanding your own body, because you're trying to get those small, like a centimetre in the long jump or split second in a sprint. And so you're really honing in on every single thing. But now that, even when I moved to England, so I did like 1.5 years, 2 years over there, I went back to running like every single day because I didn't have Gaelic football. And I was like, do you know what? This is actually something you can bring anywhere in the world. It costs absolutely nothing. And you feel better after it. And like I was probably fitter then than I ever was playing county. But it meant like I came home then and I went back to playing with Louth straight away. And it's, I guess, juggling both. Like I know myself now, we've programs for our club football team, and every so often I'm like, yeah, this is great, all these intervals and all that, but I just need to run for my head. And I think I've actually just got so used to using that as my space, my head space. And like the girls would be like, how did you go and do a 6k? Like, and to Gaelic footballers, that's like, Jesus, like constant running. You mean you didn't even stop? Like, and I'd be like, I just need to go for my head. Like, I honestly do. Whereas they just don't get it. And I guess even now, like, we've signed up for a 10k as a team. And I think I'm one of the only ones that ever ran a 10k before. And like, I just presumed everyone does that. But I guess it's like your athletics background that you're familiar with running, you know how to push it. Like, and even straight away, they're starting to run really long distances. And like, I don't agree with that. Like for me, for football, I won't run really long, but I guess in a way I have it in my legs. Like if I had to run 10k tomorrow, I'd run 10k tomorrow, whereas some of them might die. But like some of it's in their head. And I guess that muscle memory is there as well. But I think, yeah, athletics, like I'd often think, and when you're involved in sports, you're like, if you had children, what sports would you get them involved in? And I always would say athletics, probably gymnastics too. But I think it's just a really good foundation for understanding things like come in different parts of the season, I'll work on different things, but I go back to my athletics training. Like if I want to work on speed, I use the basics that I would have learned. That's absent from football training, I suppose. Like things like we're doing with football at the minute, like they're talking about speed intervals, but we did like 1K, do 4 times 1K as fast as you can, and I'm just like, oh, this is so stupid, because you've an understanding of it, and you're like, you can't just sprint as fast as you can like 4 times around a kilometre. But I guess that's where Gaelic football at times is still a little bit stuck in the past. I know we're in different territory now. Like, I never thought I'd be doing hit sessions through Zoom for football. But yeah, I am on a Sunday morning. But yeah, it's like uncharted territory. We're doing like our 4th go up pre-season, I think.
Did you find as well though that, like, say when you were younger, when you were at the peak of your football, not that you're gone past it, around, just the fact that you've stepped back from playing out loud, did athletics help that quite a bit? The foundation you had in running, did it just make, like, you know, because I'm fitter and I find running easier, can I spend a bit more time concentrating on the other skills and it makes them a little bit easier?
Yeah, I think I always would have been fit. Like, I don't remember ever coming back and not being fit. And probably with athletics, like, you don't take 3 months off in athletics ever. You know, whereas in football, like, you'd be coming back in January and there'd be people who actually have done nothing since you were knocked out in September. And you'd be going like, what do you mean you just did nothing? Like, so I always kept fit. And I guess even the understanding, like, the basics you learn with athletics, you'd never go and do running without warming up and cooling down, especially. And those basic elements, where you go to football and people are kicking the ball over the bar before they've even warmed up, and like, you're doing well if you do a cool down ever at our football training because we're just too busy talking, like. But you learn all those basics that you know the right way to train, and you know your body and how to train it. Yeah, and I guess even with the skills, like, I would have started Gaelic at a young age as well. Like, I probably started Gaelic when I was 8, but it would have been with the boys team. So I would have been developing those skills. Whereas there's ladies football is probably a lot different like that. You've women that would have started maybe in their 20s and they're trying to learn those skills. And you can always, I think, tell a little bit who's played from a young age, just in their skill level.
Yeah, I want to come back to you playing with the boys when you were younger in a bit, but we just want to move on to some of the current initiatives you're all 3 involved in. Sara, you kind of alluded to it earlier that when in the focus groups you were asking the participants about what they enjoy, and you even started putting out some suggestions yourself as like, would you like this or would you like that? What were some things that you would have suggested first? Probably stuff that you would have enjoyed it. Oh, and what about this? And they'll come back like, oh God, no, don't make us do that. What were some of those? And then we'll go into some of the stuff that they did, they were pro, say.
Yeah, so the PhD I'm doing is Girls Active Project, so school-based intervention. So I'm with a school in Dublin at the moment, so I grew up in Tipperary, so it's rural school I went into. So I guess the sport that we would have been doing is a bit different as well. And then, showing my age now, but it's been a while since I was like a 14-year-old girl. So I went in there with ideas, but I did know that obviously it's going to be very, very different now, and different kind of barriers. And as well, I should actually probably say one of the barriers that did come up was time, and, you know, they dedicating time to this and stuff. If they weren't part of a club, like, thinking of where they're going to fit it in. So I knew my PhD was going to be kind of extracurricular. So I was like, oh, well, if we were to do it, would we do it lunchtime, after school? I even suggested breakfast club, like before school. That was out the window. They were like, I'm not getting up at 7 a.m. So I threw a few ideas at them, but I didn't want to like over dominate the focus group. So when I said something like, oh, I want it to be fun, like I want, if my friends are doing it, I want, you know, something that I'll do with them. So I said, what's fun? And then they would be like, oh, well, at the end of the year, they have like a school sports day. So that's the first thing that came into their mind. You're like, oh, so that's really, really fun. Like, and I was like, why is it fun? And then they'd be like, oh, well, music is playing, there's prizes, there's all these different things. And then I kind of had to like, I prompted them, but I kind of let them kind of rule where the intervention was going, I guess. And
then, like, to try and give us more, like what you said earlier, they want to do stuff that's fun or stuff that they enjoy. Like, what do they enjoy and what is fun? Because I know it's hard. Like, you really have to dig deep there to find out, because oftentimes they're not great at even verbalizing it themselves. So what did come out? What's the enjoyable stuff?
Stuff. Well, like we touched on there, what choice and autonomy and stuff. So I was like, okay, so if you were given a choice, like if it wasn't a PE teacher or a club manager or someone saying this is what we're going to do today, I was like, what if you could do anything? So I'm guessing that does definitely depend on what school you're working with and what the geographical area, like what's prominent in that area. But I guess what came up in where I'm in Dublin at the moment was gymnastics and more circuit training, hit home style workouts, which is maybe because of COVID as well, home workouts, but that kind of circuit style individual stuff more than, because I know I used to work primary schools as well and they were definitely more team based, but since working with post primary is more individual. That's just from my own experience now working in schools, but it would be more they can't go to the gym until they're 16 in Ireland, but if they are over 16s, the girls I work with, they like to go to the gym, they like to do their own style training. And what else came up as fun? Dancing came up very prominent. You would have girls that would be into football and camogie and soccer, but the non-team based stuff, it would be kind of dancing mainly, hit style training.
And those who had come from team backgrounds or team sport backgrounds, did they ever try and steer stuff towards games that maybe weren't as competitive, where some of the girls that maybe didn't have the grounding in team sport were more pro the individual stuff, or just kind of the novelty of some of the individual stuff and it seeming like something that older people do or more grown-up people do? Could that potentially have been drawn them towards it?
Oh, I never thought about that in that kind of sense. Because there is a drop-off rate usually around 13, 14 where they do go away from the team-based stuff to the individual. There's lots of different factors influencing that, but I'm not too sure if it's because they see it from an adult perspective.
I'd have noticed in school that if I'm given, say, you have a block of 4 weeks and we try and follow some kind of curriculum, but if you give them a choice of over the next 4 weeks, what do we want to do? Any of the camogie or football players, it's just bench ball. We just want to go hard on bench ball. They love it. Whereas the girls who don't have a team sport background could not think of anything worse to do in that time. That those who play sport want to play sport but in a more relaxed environment, whereas the others, it's straight to the circuit thing. And I often feel it's because they want to go to the gym and they want to do circuits, and it seems to be that because that's what grown-up people who exercise do. They don't play games anymore, and I feel that's what's kind of driving them towards that. Not certain if they actually enjoy it. It's more kind of perceiving themselves as, yes, I'm doing grown-up exercise here now.
That's very interesting observation. I definitely do think it would play a role. And they're trying to disassociate themselves from that primary school fun social side of it things. Could be as well that the more time that they have, or the lack of time, I guess, in that sense, because homework and other commitments and other priorities maybe take it into account, and then the evenings are busy or the weekends are busy, and they just want to factor in when they actually can be active. And something like a hit session or something like that then suits more.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. And Emma, then, your one, because yours is kind of mixed around a few different areas and it's largely home-based. When it came out from the groups to try and decide what they do, was it any different to what Sara looked at? But then also, because you'd mentioned self-determination theory earlier, how do you build in the competence aspect to doing exercise or activity over a period of time so that they're kind of aware of it or they notice it?
So the Horizon project is my PhD study, and originally when I went to John Moore's, the research group that I work within is the exercise metabolism research group. So it was very physiological based. My lead supervisor is a biochemist, and that's kind of how it started. It was going to be home-based HIIT with an aspect of technology for overweight and obese teenage girls. Follow on 2 years, that's not the case anymore. And I think that's because we kind of realised that, well, first of all, teenage girls don't want to get weighed, let alone getting muscle biopsies. And secondly, that the issue is so much bigger than just overweight and obese teenage girls. Actually, physical activity is a massive chronic issue across, all girls regardless of their weight. So Horizon project came to be, and it was always home-based. It wasn't like a COVID. It just happened that we were going to do home-based. I guess home-based is probably the wrong word for it. I don't really know how to call it. The girls have the autonomy to choose whatever they want to do. So they're asked to be active 3 times a week, whether that's, pre-COVID in a gym or in a team-based setting. Obviously right now, the majority of options that we have are, Pilates, yoga, HIIT, that type of thing, where they can go for a walk 3 times a week. So we tried to kind of hit the autonomy need in that aspect, but the girls are also partnered with ProfDoc and MSc sport and exercise psychology students. So each mentee or each participant is partnered with a trainee psychologist. And so we, in terms of like kind of competency, they start their first call. So they have weekly video calls with each other. That's kind of tapered off towards the end of the 12-week block. So on kind of week 1, they set a goal that they want to achieve by the end of their 12 weeks. And then each week on the calls, they kind of reflect back to see, what's gone well in regards to reaching that goal, what's not gone so well, coping strategies and so on. And so the girls can kind of see the progress that they're making for themselves. Also small things like, we have a calendar. Each of the girls get like a physical booklet. I actually have it there, but they have like a calendar, and they write in their 3 activity sessions they're doing that week, and then they tick them off. And yourself, like seeing a to-do list, when you have it ticked off, like that motivation, like that satisfaction that things are being done. So even that just helps them to see that actually, I can do 3 exercise sessions every week, and that helps them to feel capable.
That's really important, I think, in that it's not just a case of you're going to be active, it's helping them decide on the times they're going to be active, what type of activity they're going to do, because it gives ownership, but it also builds those skills that when the intervention is over and you're finished, you're like, okay, I'm out the gap now, best luck with life. Like, you've given them so much more than just do these exercises at these times until I say stop, that now they're far more likely to stay being active. Is that something you were very conscious of at the start, that you kind of wanted to have the longer term impacts?
Yeah, so my research team is quite big. There's like my supervisory team, we have cardiologists and psychologists, there's heaps of people on it, and that was always like an argument in terms of, are we looking at the mechanism of, the physical benefits and even mental health benefits of physical activity, or are we really looking at like behavior change? And I thought initially when I started this, I wanted to look at the mechanisms, but really there's no point in seeing how beneficial physical activity is if no one's doing it. And so now the real focus is like, even if after these 12 weeks, fingers crossed, with all this work with the accelerometers, there is an increase in MVPA, but if there's not, that wouldn't be the end of the world if their motivation changed, because maybe it takes longer than 12 weeks to develop those habits, and then maybe in 24 weeks or however they can start implementing things for themselves. And so for me, myself, and within this PhD, I think just changing the girls' perceptions of sport and exercise and physical activity, and helping them to find an activity that they enjoy and that they can continue for the rest of their lives. That's what's important for me anyway.
Yeah, it's key there to look at the attitudes and behaviours around physical activity as opposed to the activity itself. And Sara, you mentioned earlier on you were using the behaviour change wheel to guide yours. Why is it so important to use a framework to guide your change? Is it linked to Emma's point of it being there long term? Is it more likely to be successful, or is it a combination of both?
No, just to add on to Emma's there, I couldn't agree more that I'm similar in my PhD. Like, ideally they'd be increasing their moderate vigorous physical activity levels, but I'm also really conscious of their self-efficacy levels and their well-being and their overall quality of health. And I'm hoping that when they start doing the physical activity that they enjoy, then everything else will increase alongside of that. With regard to the behaviour change wheel, that builds on over 93 other, builds on other frameworks, theory-driven frameworks, which is in the research world, if you develop an intervention that's underpinned by theory, they tend to be more sustainable and relevant for your target audience for long-term success, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. And Bronagh, you're involved in the Gaelic for Girls, while you're not specifically there, the one person kind of have the specific ownership, I suppose, of that Sara and Emma do. You are still involved in implementing your club and stuff. Could you give us just a little overview of what it is, and then maybe some of the outcomes that have been found from it?
Yeah, so it would have been, 2 years ago now that we set it up in our club. So it's a programme that's run by Ladies Gaelic Football. They've Gaelic for Girls, Gaelic for Teens, and then they're Gaelic for Mothers and Others. And we looked at, like, we were probably lucky enough, we've had a lot of senior success up until that point, and probably forgot about our underage girls. And we're letting them come through the men's kind of side of the club. So you might get maybe 2 every year, kind of the ones who are really into it. And then I looked at, this programme, I'll just apply, kind of. I said, I'll just apply, I'll stick the club in there, sure. And then when you get it, it's like, all right, it's up to you now. But we actually ended up recruiting, like, the first week. So a programme just where you allow girls to come to the club. They don't have to register. It's open basically for 8 to 12 weeks, and you put on fun Gaelic football type training sessions from age 6 to 12, and they get a jersey at the end, and there's really that element of fun about it rather than, I suppose, training sessions. So we put it in place, and I kind of thought the first day I had registration, like, we're a rural club in Louth, and I was like, oh, if we've 20, like, we'd be doing well. And like 47 showed up to the registration, and I was like, oh my god, like, I was texting like the girls off the senior team being like, I need more bodies. Like, we had extra bodies to deal with the form filling, but like I was just like crap. So that was good, and what was even better was it built on it week in, week out. So we ended up with 63 girls in those ages that signed up to play. And I suppose when you're involved in research all the time, like, all I wanted to kind of ask was like, why are you here? Like, who told you about this? So I did like just a little questionnaire, just for my own, like, obviously just to see, like, if we can figure out why they're coming now. And a lot of them said they didn't want to play with the boys team. And I guess it's probably daunting starting off for girls. The boys have probably been playing from a very young age, and even stereotypically, like, I look at my own niece and nephews, people would have got the boys' footballs as present, but I don't know if anyone got the girls. Well, I did. But I don't think anyone else. So they've stereotypically been surrounded by football. For girls, they haven't. And I guess it's becoming a lot more popular now. So there is more chance to be involved, and even like the tracksuits and stuff that you can get now at O'Neill's, there's pink jerseys, there's all that type of things, and I don't mean to be stereotypical, but it's making it a lot more fun for girls to be involved in, where with the boys it was a lot more difficult. Like, I even think back to when I played with the boys team, like, I probably would have given up a lot earlier. Like, I had to come dressed to play. I had to stand outside the dressing room on my own while the boys all changed and the team was named, and then I'd be thrown out a jersey outside the door. And even like, you had to have a top to have under it because you couldn't just strip off. Loads of little barriers that I guess if you were anyway 50-50 on it, you'd have thrown in the towel. So I guess it's eliminating that, and the girls loved, like, probably the highlight for them was the t-shirt that they all had at the end, and that little sense of kind of community and they're part of something. And I think, like, we looked at, like, I've delivered some of the Gaelic for Teens programme for the LGFA now, and a lot of it does surround, and it's just interesting to hear Sara and Emma what is fun, like, because that's what's coming back, is they want it to be more fun, or they give up because it's not fun. And even with our senior team, it was like, it's no fun anymore. Like, no one's enjoying it. And then like all of a sudden it was like, what is fun? And like it was coming up time and time again. It's not that it has to be easy. Like you still want the coaches to push you. You still want to be challenged. You still want to achieve success and goals. But also little things like having nice gear that we all have. And it's probably one thing that hit me when I started playing ladies football as opposed to the boys team. Was this, like, at first I was like, what is this? Was the team huddle, like at the start, and you all put your hands in, and it was like, 1, 2, 3, and do a little chant. And like when you come from boys sport and you're like, I was an absolute tomboy, and you're like, what is this? Like it's just like, oh my God, I can't do this. And even I remember little things like in my first few training sessions with the girls team, like girls might kick the ball away or like do a wonky pass, and there would be so much encouragement. It'd be like, well done, that's brilliant. And I'd be like, that is terrible. Because like I was just used to that boys being boys, and you were told, like I remember you were told if it was crap. Like but I guess it just struck me like I still remember that being like, oh my God, like that's not good. But I guess it comes back to that encouragement that we do need to give girls a lot more of, and those initiatives are really good. But I think even that, like we had 63 for Gaelic for girls, but then the following year, you know, it was just left, and I was like, you know, are we going to do anything this year? And I was like, oh yeah, if you want to do something. And it was like, okay, we'll do a 6-week program. But like that, it comes back to those interventions and things. It is, I guess, the long term. Like it was great. We had loads of people down at the club for 8 to 12 weeks. But you want them to sign up. You want them to make that commitment and to see the benefits of it. Like that's really what you want. And like I always think back to like coaching. If you're coaching girls, so many underage coaches are focused on winning the under 14 championship or the under 16 championship, and I kind of now think about it, I'm like, do you know what, if a few of those girls are still playing when they're 20, you've done your job right. Rather than like coaches tend to be focused on, I need to get that on my CV, you know, I'm going to go for the county job or I'm going to do this, as opposed to actually, if I keep girls involved in sport, that's way more beneficial.
And that actually brings us on to our next point. We were going to ask you about some of your coach education work, and that oftentimes you've realised that the more players you keep involved, your chances of success go way up anyway, just because you've far more of a talent pool to draw from, or they're going to bring each other on even more and more. And just back to your point there on that, the training sessions, or the sessions are structured more around fun than around typical training. Ages 6 to 12, in an ideal world, would they be the same thing anyway?
In an ideal world, I think they should be. But like I refereed like an under 12 girls challenge match last year, and they had no competitions because of COVID, so there was challenges. And I was like, a lot of the time they try and get the senior players to referee it. So I said, yeah, no bother, I'll referee it. And I swear to God, I actually nearly cried by the end of it, like the amount of abuse I got. Like one of the managers came over of the other team and like was trying to teach me the rules of Gaelic football. And I was just like, I know the rules of Gaelic football, like, you know, and it was just mental. It struck me even. I remember a girl taking a sideline ball in the match, and she went to hand pass it, and I blew the whistle and I said, just take it again, but you have to kick it. And I just tended to referee it that way, like we weren't keeping the score or anything, but I was trying to teach her, you know, I wasn't taking it off her, but you know, the next time just kick it. And the manager took the ball off her and was like, give it to Aisling, like Aisling will take it. And I was just like, these are like 10, 11-year-olds. Like, if she's not being allowed to kick the ball today, when is she ever going to be allowed? Like, and I just, like, I should have been more vocal, but I just wanted to go home. I was like, get me out of here.
And that touches on the safe space we're trying to create. Because, like, you kind of brought it up there as well, in that like it's great that the LGFA are bringing out the pink jerseys or the more feminine team stuff, but at the same time, and you particularly notice it yourself playing, you still want to be competitive, you still want to play hard, you still like are putting yourself out there to deal with losing games and having hardship and stuff like that. And I'd say, like, if we were to do focus groups purely with females who come from a sporting background, like, fun will often be defined as competition, as being competitive, as putting yourself in those environments. So it can be a difficult balance to strike between, like, some ways putting a feminine slant on what started as a male sport and has grown the opposite direction out, but at the same time keeping it to a decent level of competitiveness for those who just want competition.
Yeah, I think especially like when you're with the county team, it's a lot easier because everyone's at a certain standard, but it's when you're with the club team that's tricky, because you might have people who played county, you might have people who are currently playing county, and then you'll have people who just want to be there for the social aspect. And I think that's, yeah, I think even like it strikes me in Ireland with female sport, we kind of tiptoe around females sometimes. And it struck me, I was watching one of the Irish women's soccer matches recently, and like they didn't play great, if you're being honest. But after it, like they kind of threw the game away. And after it, the commentators were like, oh, you know, they can be proud of that performance, you know, because they're girls almost. And I know I'm probably being sensitive around it, but it really struck me. Like, I don't know if you watched any of the Aussie Rules women's, the AFLW, because they just, like, they don't hold back on the women. But if we want to be treated as equal, like, they almost give them that respect of saying they have a terrible game and, you know, she's not at the races today and that type of thing. And if you're playing elite sport, you want to be treated like that. Like, don't patronise them either. And I think we probably do that a little bit with female sport in Ireland. It's like almost, oh, aren't we doing great? Lidl are great for ladies football. But like, that's one sport. You know, and even today, like, I was on my phone trying to watch Phil Healy, like, who qualified in the European Championship, you know, and you're just going, like, there's no word about this. And we should be glad because RT Player have it on the player, but it should be on TV. And we're okay with that. You know, we tend to take the small wins a little bit too often, I think. Where with AFLW in Australia, there was a really good article I read recently because they came in straight into being semi-professional. It put the women's sport in a different place than, I suppose, ladies football and camogie and athletics, where it was male dominated and we're just a side of it.
Is that likely to filter back a bit to ladies football now?
The professionalism kind of...
Not in terms of professionalism, isn't it, like being paid for play, but maybe sometimes the higher standards maybe analysts start to view games in, that like they're just more, not an old pat on the back, they're like, I'm actually going to be critical of stuff that deserves being critical of here.
Yeah, I think female commentators seem to be a lot more comfortable being critical of females than males do, which I guess it's just that kind of, I don't know what society, like, I get it, like if a man slays the game, he could be all over the papers, like, but if we want to be treated equal, then that's what it's there for. And I suppose even it comes to, like, with the pundits and that, like, having females there, but having females there, like, that are good at analysing. They're not just there because they're females. Like, and that's probably one thing with ladies football. You have a female liaison person with every team. And, like, I've been asked to be it because I'm female. But I haven't been asked to be it because I play county or because I have a good coaching background or anything like that. It's just, you're female, you'll do. And, like, for that reason, I would have said no. Like,
that's probably a difficult position for you to say there. You are getting a role and it's possibly exposure for a female in that position, but at the same time you have to say, I'm not here for the right reasons and the motives behind me getting this position aren't okay. And like, it's very strong for you to say it, but at the same time it's going to take a while before fully earning roles like that for your ability, not just because of the gender balance people are trying to have.
Yeah, like I even know in the UK, Emma, you probably know more on this. I only heard it on the radio and it caught my attention. There was a female coach over there, and it was like, oh, will she go to a men's team now? It'd be a great step up for her. But it was like, you know, why is it a step up? Because they're male. Like, do you know, and there's that whole, like, we do need more females. Not just coaching, like, I don't care if they coach men's sport, but we don't even have females coaching female sports. Like in my whole career, I had one female coach.
Yeah, we'd even sort of PE trained a couple of years ago, and the only female coach we could think of at the time was Anne Dowling, who was over Kilkenny Camogie, and even she stepped down. In fairness, she's gone to the men's game, so at least she is getting a role there as well. But let's not say, oh, at least she is. We need to see more and more of stuff like that. One thing I've noticed as well is that around females in media and stuff, that sometimes it can be hard to see them as personalities or having opinions in their own right. Like, I'd have noticed some hurling or camogie commentators, and when a female gives a view that I think is off the wall, like, where are you getting that from? You would hear people say, why do they have women on these panels? It's not okay. Whereas if a male gave the same thing, it's very much to the individual. Like, if Donald Cusack said something that's off the wall, I'm like, that's a stupid opinion. Why are we listening to him? Whereas when a female says it, why did they have females on? And it's not a fair comparison to be making there at all.
He is like, how long would Joe Brawley last if he was female? Like, well, no, you're right. Like, the amount of rows I have here at home and those comments, like, you don't want to live with me.
Just in terms there of role models and stuff like that, Emma, when we were kind of planning out today, you made a really, really good point around, like, the lack of partly female researchers on physical activity, but also just research in general done on physical activity in females, and why that's the case. And even when we were chatting about it yesterday, like, Damien is really intrigued by this around, like, why is this happening and what can we do about it going forward?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm doing a paper at the moment. I have a friend in the States and a friend in Germany, so the three of us are writing this paper, and it's kind of a bit of a weird concept, I guess. It's kind of a review, but we've basically looked at the breakdown of the top 6 sport and exercise science journals since 2014, and we've looked at all the intervention studies. So there's like 14 million participants or something ridiculous, and we've divided, like, to see basically how many of those participants are women, how many are men, and then also looked in particular around, like, you know, so some studies are only going to look at specific like sex, like, so for example, like breast cancer in women was obviously going to only be studied in women, and, you know, so we've accounted for that. And like across all journals, all years, the discrepancy between like male and female participants within sports science research is just, like, it's a landslide, like, for the guys. Like, it's just, and I think, you know, I understand it. I understand that especially within sports science, you need to account for things like the menstrual cycle, and, you know, that's expensive, that's time consuming. But at the same time, you know, a lot of the research that we have now, whether it's around like ergogenic aids or even just in healthcare in general, you know, whether it's clinical trials for medications or even seatbelts, or, you know, the weight of, you know, backpacks for like military, you know, people, they're all based on men. Like, those studies only involved men, but it's being rolled out for men and women, and we are different. Like, you know, women are not small men, and you know, like, for example, I think I read a book there recently that was talking about I think it was about like heart attack in general, and that kind of you know, clinical trials that have developed drugs have not been effective, and so they've been shelved. But because men and women have completely different like symptoms, different outcomes in terms of heart disease and heart attacks, you know, would that pill have been effective for women? We don't know, because women participants aren't included. So I just think it's an interesting, I think that there's more awareness of it recently. I've seen a lot more papers coming out about like this kind of gender imbalance within sports science research, but yeah, more needs to be done. More funding needs to go into it. I think we need more women physiologists. and just greater understanding about what's preventing women coming forward to take part, or is it because they're being excluded within the inclusion criteria?
And do you, with Emma, you mentioned that you work with a couple of, or you've psychologists kind of in some of the research that you're doing. That's something at the age of 13 where you really see girls maybe dropping off from sport or maybe lowering in physical activity levels and that. Is it very much, is it something that is being looked into, like is it a social conditioning kind of thing that leads towards all these outcomes down the line that we're speaking of, or is that very much like not understood at the moment as to what has been kind of the experience for young girls growing up, leading to that point where they might go off on different lines and might end up then not being part or not being looked upon in research settings because maybe they're not getting into those settings themselves. Is there any information or data kind of around that?
Yeah, I mean, like the gender discrepancy in physical activity is in terms of gender is all the way back at preschool. Like, although I think it's, we have this massive drop off when, we have that transition from primary into secondary, but really like we see it straight away, once kids, enter that preschool, the boys are more inclined to, play with balls, play with even Lego, these type of things. And the girls kind of are given, art material and music material, and they watch Disney princesses like on TV and read these books. And so I think I think there's no right or there's not one answer to that, but I think it is like a societal issue, and all these small things that, I know that like even in this conversation, like, I know Sara, like you spoke about getting changed like before PE, and Bronagh, you're talking about like your own like small things, but those small barriers, I think, they're the things that you remember, aren't they? Like now I remember like these small things, and I think sometimes like when you say it like in papers or whatever, they come across as kind of like flippant like comments, but they're stopping girls like taking part. And I think, when you grow, I don't know, again, like it's just a recent paper I read about like preschoolers, that discrepancy between like boys being more active, and it leads all the way up as well as like within team-based sports. I think there's like 10 times as many boys involved in team-based sports before they hit teenage years than girls. So it's like the whole way through, girls are more involved in individual sports. And is that because they don't want to be judged? Is that because they don't want to be compared? Is that because they like doing things in their own time and not having to commit to team training? But yeah, I don't know. I think I would hypothesize that a large reason why women aren't involved in particular with sports science physiology is money and time.
Sara, to just turn it over to you for a second there, looking at active role models and just being active, not the research around it and all, but say over the past month, doing all your steps, girls following along, doing your intervention in school and all, like that's creating a very positive influence in ways that are easy enough to do. How do we kind of give guidance to potential parents or coaches or even young girls who may be listening around? What is a positive influence, and how do we differentiate them from an influencer who is out to make a name or a quick book or whatever like that for themselves?
With regard to positive influences, thanks very much, I try. I guess influence could be within your own home. Like my biggest influence when I was growing up was definitely my mother. Like she was a sports coach and personal trainer, so for me growing up I didn't know any different, but like she would have obviously played a massive role with regard to my own physical activity. But it could be a teacher in a school, it could be someone in the community. Like I worked in like inner city Dublin there for a few years back, and their biggest influence was a boxer, with regard to the ladies anyway, the women. Kelly Harrington, I think her name was, but like she was massive in their community, and like all the girls then were just looking at her as a positive role model. So I guess it could go from like within their home to the community level, or then obviously at broader national level if you want to look at Katie Taylor or something. Is the question, how do we focus on those rather than the Instagram influencers?
Yeah, how can someone like tell the difference. Like, okay, Katie Taylor's obviously a really good influence, as is Kelly Harrington and like that. But then you have others, and like, do you know what? These have all these followers. They're like promoting all this stuff. Is this good, or how can I maybe tell what's a good person to be looking at here? And what sometimes are they trying to sell us a bit of snake oil here?
It's a good question. I guess what's their motivation? You could look at. Are they coming from a genuine place? Like, are they also interested in the same thing? Are they looking out to, you know, improve overall health and well-being? Or is there a financial gain, I guess? Or is there more of an incentive for them to want you to buy a certain thing to look this certain way when you're never going to probably look that way by buying that product? So I guess just questioning it around it, and self-awareness, I guess, and awareness around what you're actually buying. I guess that could help. If you're a parent, I wouldn't know when it comes to raising a teenager in this day and age. I'm sure it's difficult.
When you touched on it there, that your own mother was such a positive influence sporting wise, that's obviously great, but do you think there's still an issue of, say, more traditional parents who would say push their little girls away from sport as something that's maybe not something that a girl should be typically doing, and pushing them more towards like other activities and away from sport? Do you think that's still active in kind of younger girls, or not so much anymore?
Personally, I hope not. From my own research, and personally, I wouldn't have spoke to girls in focus groups or questionnaires that would have been a negative impact, but some of them wouldn't have any impact, as in like they're indifferent, so they wouldn't encourage them, but they wouldn't tell them not to do it either, when obviously you'd ideally would have a parent that would support you and encourage you to do it.
So like passively working it against it rather than actively, no, you can't do this.
So far, I've personally researched and my own personal talking to girls, but I'd hope there's no parents there. I'm sure it does exist. I'm sure there are parents out there who maybe has a daughter who would want to go down the boxing route and saw Kelly Harrington or Katie Taylor, and then I'm sure stereotypically there are parents out there that are like, oh no, I wouldn't want my daughter to get injured or, you know, go down that path. But
in a roundabout way, can they potentially impact it negatively around the motivations they see it for, like, oh, go out and be active now so that you look better, or you do this, as opposed to the kind of internal enjoyment you get from being active? Can that potentially be a bias parents might bring without even realising it themselves?
Yeah, no, I definitely do. And parents, but even friends, peers, I'd even notice myself sometimes if I go to a gym, or pre-COVID, when you go to a gym, someone might say, oh, why do you even go? Like, you don't even need to lose weight. That mentality drives me crazy. Like, there's so many other reasons you want to go to a gym, you know. I could go on a tangent here, but like the other benefits that come out of it, and like parents could not consciously could say something like that, you know, to their parent or to their child, but it could be in a not even just body weight area, but it could be like, oh, well, you're not very good at this, and then without even realising it, the child might be completely disencouraged to ever try that again, or they might try to, you know, push them towards this particular sport, or because they liked it when they were growing up or whatever. So I guess maybe parents wouldn't be so self-aware, or friends or whoever is talking, so self-aware of the influence of their words, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's quite important. Something I want to touch on there that ties into stereotypes and stuff as well. Emma, you have a background as an Olympic weightlifter and a powerlifter. Like, have you noticed some of the stigma around that, like, oh, girls can't be lifting weights, or they'll get massive? Is that something you've had to fight a bit? And at the same time, like, when I touch on competence there, I find weight-based training brilliant for that, because it's so easy to see small improvements over a period of time and can give those little psychological boosts so often, that realistically it can actually be a great option, but it's breaking that barrier of it being okay or not okay.
Yeah, I mean, so I did my first powerlifting competition back in 2011 or 2012, and that's like when it wasn't. I feel like now it's really trendy, and like for the last like 3 or 4 years, I think, you know, it's I don't think that there's that big of a stereotype anymore around like girls lifting weights. I think it's pretty common. Obviously, we've had this big wave of you know, Instagram influencers and all that kind of thing that I think has had a positive influence in that regard, that, you know, more women are lifting weights. Of course, when I started, you know, you have like my dad, don't get too big now, and you know, you don't want, the arms are getting very big, Emma. But like, you know, that was never, I didn't worry too much about that, as long as, like, you know, as you said, like, I can see my improvements, and that was really what I focused on. But yeah, I'd like to think that sometimes I wonder, though. I think that these stereotypes are gone, but obviously all of us here are very involved, like, in the sport. So, you know, you think like, oh God, no one believes that, or no one, but actually, you know, but yeah.
Yeah, both powerlifting and Olympic lifting, they can give a great empowerment to females, particularly younger females who may not be from a sporty background, but both as well as like getting stronger at something. Like when you get stronger, you just feel better about yourself walking around and stuff.
Yeah, so I used to have a studio, like a personal training studio back in Dublin, back a while ago, and so predominantly I used to just work with females, and we would always, like, you know, their training program was strength based, and that was kind of always what we worked on. And then at the weekend, so we'd always do like a Saturday morning where all the girls who I would PT individually would come in and do like a conditioning session, and that can be kind of, they're getting that social environment. And you know yourself, like, clients like want to sweat, and people feel like when they've done a workout, you know, if they've sweat, it was a good workout, so that, you know, you can tick that box and they've done that once during the week. But, you know, predominantly their programs were focused on strength training, and you can see, you know, even within Horizon at the moment, one session we do, so we offer like live workouts that the girls can sign into, and one session every week is strength based. And even though we're doing it at home, it's just like, you know, helping them to learn the movement pattern of a squat, of a deadlift, you know, hip hinges, that type of thing. But I think when you do start lifting weights and you see that you know, increase in just getting comfortable within the movement, and obviously within actual strength, that determination, I feel like that determination and that like awareness that you can overcome, you know, especially when you're lifting big weights, those skills like transfer to other areas of your life. And even within Horizon, the girls were saying it when we ran the pilot study back last year, that even within HIIT sessions, you know, like when you are getting stronger, you're able to do a push-up and you weren't able to do a push-up 6 weeks ago, that feeling of determination and perseverance can transfer into homework or schoolwork or, you know, whatever else. And I think sometimes that's almost the benefit of exercise and physical activity. Obviously, you know, you have endorphins and whatever else, but I think actually like the traits and the psychosocial skills that you develop that can be transferred are almost just as important.
No, they're excellent points there. Do you want to brag about any of your powerlifting numbers or anything like that? Blow Damien away there, you're probably stronger than he is.
I don't know, because I was having a little bit of creep on your Instagram there yesterday, John, and I saw a CNL 170 squat. I was thinking, oh geez, I hope you don't ask me that question. I got a 137 squat was my best, and that was a long time ago. So hopefully maybe pre-COVID or post-COVID, maybe we can get back to something like that, but yeah.
No, that's excellent. That's kind of brought us more or less to the end. If there's anything you want to touch on there now, feel free to say. If there's any tips for like younger girls or people working with younger girls, say it there now. And also if you want to plug any of your, say like, I know Sara and Emma, you both have specific social media pages for your research projects there. Emma, if you want to plug yours, then we'll let Sara do hers.
Yeah, so the Instagram is the Horizon Project, so Horizon HER Proj PROJ, if you want to give it a follow.
My Girls Active project is only on Twitter at the moment. It's at GAP DCU, so GAP Girls Active Project DCU. And my own Instagram is at Sara.McQueen.
Lovely. And Bronagh, if anyone in their local club wants to get involved or get their club involved in the Gaelic for Girls or Gaelic for Teens, how would they go about that?
If you keep an eye on the ladies Gaelic football pages, either on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, you don't even have to be part of the Gaelic for Teens, but they've skill challenges kind of these weeks just to keep people sane, I think, through COVID. So yeah, they're always advertising even little workshops if you're interested in coaching girls or that type of thing. They're always a good shout these evenings that you can't get out.
And they brought in one of their biggest LGFA stars to promote the video the other day, bring up to the 30,000 followers.
Yeah, they were stuck. No, all the Gaelic for Teens ambassadors had to do the skills challenge. There was good slagging on the group because the day I did it reached the 30,000 mark. And then I was like, oh, what was it yesterday? Was it 20,000? And they were like, no, we went up one follower. So no, I can't claim that.
Lovely, thanks for that. And Damien or Shane, if you want to hop in with any other questions.
No, that was perfect. Really informative.
Lovely, thanks a million for your time, everyone, and we'll see you all again next week.